The Zephyrian High Council chamber hummed with the soft blue glow of quantum processors, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the faces of beings who had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Counselor Vexthera, her elongated cranium pulsing with bioluminescent patterns, gestured dismissively at the holographic display floating before them. "Another wild tale from the Outer Rim worlds," she announced, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species. Humans, they call them. Supposedly a warrior race that once challenged the might of the Dominion. Ripples of what could only be described as laughter echoed through the chamber, though the sound emerged as harmonic frequencies rather than audible mirth. The 12 council members, representing the most advanced civilizations in known space, found such claims amusing at best. Counselor Mordak, a towering figure whose silicon-based form glittered like living diamond, accessed the data with a thought. According to these reports, these humans were supposedly bipedal creatures from a small blue world in an unremarkable spiral arm. The tales claimed they possessed neither advanced technology nor psychic abilities, yet somehow posed a threat to galactic order. "Pure mythology," declared Counselor Zelandra, her gaseous form shifting colors as she spoke. "The Dominion's records are comprehensive. No such species exists in our databases. If they ever existed at all, which I doubt, they've been extinct for millennia." The discussion might have ended there, as so many similar debates had over the centuries, but for the arrival of an unexpected guest. The chamber's security systems detected an approaching vessel, though its design matched no known configuration in their databases. The ship that materialized in the Council's viewing field appeared primitive by their standards. Angular metal construction with visible weapon ports and crude thrust systems. "Unidentified vessel, you have entered restricted space," transmitted the automated defense grid. "State your origin and purpose." The response came in a language the translation matrices struggled to process, filled with harsh consonants and emotional inflections that seemed almost aggressive. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We've come to discuss matters of mutual concern." Counselor Vexthera's patterns flickered in surprise. "Terran? That designation doesn't exist in our linguistic databases." The chamber fell silent as the implications settled. Their translation systems, capable of interpreting over 50 million known languages and dialects, had encountered something genuinely alien. The ship requesting docking permission bore technologies they couldn't classify, built by beings they dismissed as legend. "Perhaps," Mordak suggested, his crystalline form dim with uncertainty, "we should hear what they have to say." Admiral Chen's shuttle docked with Council Station Alpha without ceremony, though every sensor on the massive installation focused on the small craft. When the airlock opened, the beings who emerged defied every expectation the Council had harbored. They stood upright on two legs, as the legends claimed, but there was something unsettling about their presence. Where the Council members had evolved beyond physical conflict, these creatures moved with predatory grace. Their eyes, small, focused organs, tracked every detail of their surroundings with calculating intelligence. Chun herself appeared unremarkable by galactic standards. Medium height, dark hair streaked with silver, wearing what appeared to be a military uniform of simple design. But when she spoke, her words carried weight that made the ancient counselors pause. "We know you've been telling stories about us," she began without preamble. "Humans as myth, Earth as a fairy tale, our civilization as nothing more than cautionary folklore parents tell their children." Vexthera's bioluminescence stuttered. "You must understand, we have no records of your species in our databases. The Dominion has mapped every inhabited system in this galaxy." "Has it?" Chin's smile held no warmth. "Tell me, Counselor, when was the last time your people ventured into the sectors you've designated as dark zones? The regions your surveys marked as uninhabitable or too dangerous to explore?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The truth was uncomfortable. The Zephyrians and their allied civilizations had long since ceased expanding their territories. They had grown content with their established domains, leaving vast regions of space unexplored. "Those zones contain no habitable worlds," Zelandra protested, her gaseous form shifting to deeper red hues. "Our long-range sensors confirmed this centuries ago." Chen laughed. and the sound sent involuntary shivers through the assembled beings. It was a predator's laugh, filled with dark amusement. Your sensors detected what we wanted them to detect. Did you really think a species that survived the Void Wars, that sent the Harbingers fleeing to the dark between galaxies, would leave themselves vulnerable to casual observation? Silence stretched across the chamber. The Void Wars were ancient history, event from the galaxy's distant past when mysterious forces had threatened all life. The Harbingers, entities of such power that even the combined might of the early galactic civilizations had barely driven them away. These were events from before the current order, from a time when the galaxy was young and chaotic. Impossible, Mordak whispered, his crystalline structure resonating with disbelief. The Void Wars ended eons ago. No species from that era could have survived. Most didn't, Chin agreed. The Altarians, the Vorthan Empire, the Crystalline Confederacy, all gone. Consumed by the void or broken by the war. But some learned to hide. Some learned to wait. Some learned to prepare. She gestured, and her aide activated a small device. The chamber filled with a three-dimensional star chart that made several counselors gasp. It showed the galaxy as they knew it, but with massive sections revealed in detail they'd never seen. Thousands of star systems, hundreds of inhabited worlds, all existing in the spaces they'd thought empty. We've been watching you for quite some time, Chen continued. Your expansion, your politics, your growing complacency. The Zephyrian Confederacy and its allies, content in your technological supremacy, convinced that evolution has carried you beyond the need for conflict. The Admiral walked slowly around the chamber, her boots clicking against the crystalline floor. Each step seemed to echo with hidden menace. You've built a beautiful civilization. Art, philosophy, scientific advancement beyond what most species achieve. But you've forgotten something important. Evolution isn't finished with this galaxy. The void still hungers. The Harbingers still wait in the dark between stars. And they're stirring again. Counselor Vexteraz's patterns flashed in alarm. You speak of ancient threats as if they were current concerns. Our detection networks would alert us to any Harbinger activity. Would they? Chun stopped walking and fixed the counselor with a stare that seemed to see straight through her. Your networks monitor known space, the space you control and understand. They don't watch the deep void, the spaces between galaxies where light itself goes to die. They don't listen for the whispers that echo across dimensions. She activated another device, and the chamber filled with a sound that made every present being recoil. It was wrong on a fundamental level. Not quite noise, not quite music, but something that spoke directly to primal fears buried in genetic memory. That's a Harbinger call sign, Chen explained as the sound faded. We recorded it 6 months ago from the galactic edge. They're probing our defenses, testing our response times. The old wards that kept them at bay are failing. The council members exchanged alarm communications through their quantum link networks. The implications were staggering. If the Harbingers were indeed returning, the galaxy faced a threat unlike anything their peaceful civilizations were prepared to handle. Even if what you say is true, Zilandra managed, her form now a pale, frightened blue. What does this have to do with your people? Why reveal yourselves now? Chen's expression grew grim. Because the galaxy needs guardians again. Beings willing to do what you've evolved beyond. Fight, kill, sacrifice everything to hold the line against forces that want to unmake reality itself. She walked to the chamber's central display and placed her hand on the control interface. Images began flowing across the screens. Human worlds hidden in nebulae, massive orbital installations bristling with weapons, fleets of warships moving through folded space. This is our civilization, she announced. We never stopped preparing for war, because we never forgot that some enemies can't be negotiated with, can't be reasoned with, and won't stop until everything that lives has been consumed. The images showed humans in environments that would kill most galactic species, training in hard vacuum, fighting mock battles in the hearts of stars, children learning strategy and tactics alongside mathematics and literature. It was a civilization built around conflict, honed by generations of preparation for an enemy that might never come. Except now it was coming. Your sensors are detecting increased void activity because we've been engaging Harbinger scouts for the past year, Chen continued. Small forces, probing expeditions, testing how much the galaxy has changed since their last incursion. So far, we've been able to handle them alone. But that's about to change. The display showed star charts with marked positions, dozens of them scattered across the galactic rim. Each mark represented a point where reality itself was beginning to fray, where the barriers between normal space and the void were wearing thin. Breach points, the Admiral explained. The Harbingers are preparing a full-scale invasion. Not just military conquest, they want to unravel the fundamental forces that hold matter together. They want to return this galaxy to the primordial void it emerged from. Counselor Mordak's crystalline form had dimmed to barely visible levels. How long do we have? At current breach expansion rates? 6 months before the first major incursion points become stable enough for capital ship passage. 12 months before they achieve critical mass for full invasion. The timeline sent shockwaves through the chamber. 12 months to prepare for an enemy that had nearly destroyed the galaxy once before, when it was defended by far more militaristic civilizations than the current peaceful federations. What do you want from us? Vextera asked, though her pattern suggested she already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. Chun smiled again, and this time it was even colder than before. Nothing. We're not here to ask for your help. We're here to inform you of our plans. In 72 hours, humanity will begin Phase 1 of Operation Absolute Zero. We're going to wake up this galaxy's dormant defenses, activate every ancient weapon system the old civilizations left behind, and turn every habitable world into a fortress. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. The ancient weapon systems Chan referenced were relics from the Void Wars. Technologies so powerful they've been deliberately hidden or destroyed to prevent misuse. Activating them would require override codes that hadn't been used in millennia. You can't possibly have access to those systems, Zilander protested. The authorization codes were scattered across dozens of extinct civilizations. Were they? Chen's aide stepped forward, revealing a device none of them recognized, a crystalline construct that pulsed with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. This is a Vorthan command key, one of 7 we've recovered from the ruins of their empire. We've spent the last 1,000 years collecting the pieces your people forgot. The device projected authentication codes that the Chamber's systems recognized as genuine, impossibly ancient, carrying authorization levels that superseded even the High Council's authority. The humans weren't asking permission. They were informing the current galactic powers that their authority was about to be temporarily suspended. This is outrageous, Mordak managed. You cannot simply take control of sovereign systems. Watch us, Chen replied simply. We're not taking control. We're implementing emergency protocols written into the fundamental laws of galactic governance. Laws that supersede all current treaties and agreements when the galaxy faces existential threat. The chamber erupted in protest, dozens of languages creating a cacophony of outrage and disbelief. But Chen simply stood in the center of it all, waiting patiently for the noise to subside. When quiet finally returned, she continued as if nothing had happened. You'll find that every major defensive installation in the galaxy is already responding to our command codes. Your own station's weapon systems are currently under our control, though we have no intention of using them against you. As if to prove her point, the chamber's displays showed external views of Council Station Alpha. Weapon ports that hadn't been active in centuries were now glowing with lethal energy, all trained on empty space, but clearly functional. Ow! Vexteral whispered. We've been preparing, Chen answered. While you've been building art galleries and philosophy centers, we've been mapping every ancient installation, every forgotten weapons platform, every sleeping dreadnought left over from the last war. We've been ensuring that when this day came, the galaxy wouldn't be defenseless. The truth was beginning to sink in for the council members. Humanity hadn't just survived the intervening eons. They'd been actively preparing for the Harbinger's return, turning themselves into the galaxy's hidden guardians while everyone else pursued peaceful advancement. Your fleets will be contacted within the hour, the Admiral continued. We're implementing a galaxy-wide defense grid. Every inhabited system will receive protection, but you need to understand, we're not fighting this war your way. We're not going to hold committee meetings to discuss strategy. We're not going to debate the ethics of necessary actions. When the Harbingers come, we'll meet them with every weapon at our disposal. She paused, letting the implications settle. If that makes you uncomfortable, you have two choices. You can withdraw to the core systems and wait for the war to end, or you can help us save everything you've built. But you cannot and will not interfere with our operations. The message was clear. Humanity was taking charge of the galaxy's defense, whether the current powers agreed or not. They had the authority, the weapons, and apparently the resolve to do whatever was necessary to prevent galactic annihilation. As Admiral Chun and her aide prepared to leave, Counselor Vexthera called out one final question. Why? Why protect us when we dismissed you as myths? Why fight for a galaxy that forgot you existed? Chun stopped at the threshold of the airlock and looked back. For the first time, her expression softened slightly. Because that's what Guardians do, she said simply. We protect those who can't protect themselves, whether they appreciate it or not. The shuttle departed, leaving the High Council in stunned silence. Outside the station's viewports, distant stars began winking out, not destroyed, but obscured by massive objects moving into position. The hidden human fleet was revealing itself, and its size defied comprehension. The galaxy's true protectors had finally stepped out of the shadows, and everything was about to change. The emergency session of the Galactic Defense Consortium convened 18 hours after Admiral Chen's departure, though by then, the galaxy had already begun transforming around them. Commander Reltash of the Aquarian Navy stood before the assembled representatives, his scaled features reflecting the strain of the past day's revelations. The situation is unprecedented, he began, his gills fluttering with nervous energy. Within hours of the human announcement, we've detected massive energy signatures appearing throughout our territorial space. Ancient installations we didn't even know existed are coming online. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, but it looked nothing like the familiar charts they'd used for centuries. Thousands of new points of light marked previously unknown structures, orbital platforms, asteroid fortresses, and installations built into planets themselves. Fleet Admiral Kexmara of the Centaurian Republic leaned forward, her compound eyes reflecting rainbow patterns of confusion. How did they build all of this without our detection? Our long-range sensors should have identified major construction projects. They didn't build it, came a familiar voice from the chamber's entrance. Admiral Chun strode in without invitation, her human aide trailing behind with data tablets. We activated what was already there. Your predecessors were thorough in their preparations for the last Harbinger incursion. The assembled military leaders bristled at the intrusion, but Chun continued before they could voice their objections. The Vorthan Imperium alone constructed over 3,000 automated defense platforms in this galaxy. The Crystalline Confederacy built weapons that could crack planets. The Altarian Empire developed shields that could deflect stellar bombardment. All of it was placed in standby mode after the Void Wars ended, waiting for someone with the proper authorization codes to wake it up. She activated her own display, showing detailed schematics of technologies that made the current galactic powers weapons look primitive by comparison. The problem, Chun continued, is that your civilizations have grown soft. You've forgotten how to fight a real war. You've turned conflict into a gentleman's sport with rules and limitations. The Harbingers don't follow rules. Commander Velterra of the Zephyrian Defense Corps, her bioluminescent patterns flashing indignation, stood to respond. Our civilizations have evolved beyond the need for barbaric warfare. We've created a peaceful society, which is about to be consumed by entities that view your enlightenment as weakness, Chen interrupted. Let me show you what we're facing. The chamber darkened, and a new image appeared, security footage from a human outpost on the galactic rim. The recording showed a normal deep space monitoring station, its crew of 12 going about routine observations. Then, space itself seemed to tear open, revealing a darkness so complete it hurt to look at. Things emerged from that tier, shapes that defied geometric description, moving in ways that violated physics. They touched the station's hull, and matter simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, simply negated as if it had never been real in the first place. This is what a Harbinger scout ship did to our forward observation post 3 weeks ago, Chen narrated as the assembled leaders watched in horror. 12 trained military personnel, a station designed to withstand anything short of stellar collapse, gone in 47 seconds. The Harbingers didn't destroy it. They edited it out of reality. The footage ended, leaving the chamber in shocked silence. Fleet Admiral Kexmara was the first to find her voice. How do you fight something like that? Very carefully, with weapons you probably consider morally questionable, Chen replied bluntly. The Vorthan Empire developed reality anchors, devices that prevent local space-time from being altered. The Crystalline Confederacy created quantum disruptors that can damage things that don't technically exist in our dimension. We're going to use all of it. She gestured to her aide, who began distributing data tablets to each representative. These contain emergency deployment orders for your fleets. You'll note that we're not asking for volunteers. Every ship capable of void combat is being reassigned to defensive positions around critical systems. Commander Reltash examined his tablet, his scaled features darkening as he read. You're stripping our border defenses. If neighboring powers decide to take advantage, they won't, Chun stated flatly, because they're receiving the same orders. There are no more borders, no more territorial disputes, no more political games. There's only us and the things that want to unmake everything we've ever built. The implications sent ripples of concern through the assembled officers. The humans were essentially declaring martial law across the entire galaxy, superseding millennia of established sovereignty and diplomatic protocol. You cannot simply dissolve the existing governmental structure, protested Admiral Zoyaxendra, her energy-based form flickering with agitation. The people will never accept this. The people will be too busy surviving to worry about political theory, Chen responded. And before you start planning resistance movements, let me be very clear about something. She activated another display, this one showing human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. The assembled leaders gasped. There were thousands of vessels, ranging from Corvette-sized scouts to dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in their combined navies. We've been preparing for this moment for over 1,000 years. Every human world is a fortress. Every human citizen is a trained soldier. Every human vessel is a warship designed to fight enemies that can rewrite the laws of physics. We didn't reveal ourselves to ask for your cooperation. We revealed ourselves because we need you to not interfere with our operations. The message was unmistakable. Humanity possessed the military might to enforce their will across the entire galaxy, and they weren't interested in negotiation. Fleet Admiral Kexmara studied her tablet more carefully, noting deployment schedules and tactical assignments. These positions, you're creating overlapping fields of fire around every inhabited system. It's brilliant defensive strategy, but it leaves enormous gaps in coverage. The gaps are intentional, Chen explained. We want the Harbingers to concentrate their forces in specific areas where we can bring maximum firepower to bear. This isn't a war of territorial control. It's a war of attrition. We're going to bleed them until they retreat back to the void. She walked to the central display and highlighted several star systems near the galactic rim. These are our primary kill zones. We've placed the most powerful ancient weapons there, weapons capable of damaging Harbinger capital vessels. When they come, we'll channel them into these areas and destroy them with concentrated firepower. Commander Velterra's patterns flickered with a mixture of fear and fascination. The energy requirements for such weapons must be enormous. How do you power them? The same way the old civilizations did, Chen replied. We're going to turn several dozen uninhabited systems into power generators. Stars will be harvested for energy, gas giants converted into fuel, entire asteroid belts processed into ammunition. The casual mention of system-wide industrial conversion sent shudders through the assembled leaders. The humans were talking about reshaping the galaxy itself for their war effort. The environmental impact, began one representative, will be negligible compared to total galactic annihilation. Chen cut him off. We're not here to debate environmental policy. We're here to ensure there's still a galaxy left for you to worry about. Admiral Kekmara set down her tablet and looked directly at the human commander. Assuming we agree to this arrangement, what role would our forces play? Your deployment orders seem to assign us primarily defensive positions. Because that's what you're suited for, Chen answered honestly. Your crews are trained for peacekeeping, exploration, and limited territorial conflicts. They're not prepared for enemies that can phase through shields, ignore armor, and turn friendly fire against you. She brought up tactical analysis of recent skirmishes between human forces and Harbinger scouts. The battles looked nothing like conventional space combat. Ships maneuvered in impossible ways, weapons fired through folded space, and reality itself seemed malleable around the combatants. However, Chen continued, "We need you for evacuation duties, civilian protection, and maintaining order in rear areas. When Harbingers break through our outer defenses, and they will break through, we need your fleets ready to move entire populations to safety." The admission that human defenses might fail sent another wave of unease through the chamber. If humanity's vast military preparations couldn't guarantee victory, what hope did anyone have? "You speak as if defeat is inevitable," observed Commander Reltash. "No, Chen Kedektiv. I speak as if this is going to be the hardest war in galactic history. The Harbingers aren't going to be stopped by a single decisive battle or clever tactical maneuver. They're going to keep coming until either they're all destroyed or we are." She paused, letting that sink in. "But we have advantages they don't expect. The old civilizations learned from their previous encounters. The defensive systems we're activating incorporate thousands of years of research into Harbinger weaknesses. And, most importantly, we've had time to prepare while they've been dormant." The display showed comparative force analyses that made several representatives gasp. The combined fleets of all current galactic powers represented less than 5% of the defensive capability that was coming online. "Where did you get all these ships?" asked Admiral Zyxandra. "We built them," Chen replied simply. "Every human world has orbital shipyards. Every asteroid belt in human space has been converted into raw materials. We've been constructing warships continuously for the past millennium." The industrial capacity required for such an undertaking was staggering. It implied a civilization that had organized every aspect of its existence around preparing for war. "Your people must live incredibly militarized lives," observed Fleet Admiral Kexmara. "Not militarized," Chen corrected. "Prepared. Human children learn mathematics by calculating orbital mechanics for weapons platforms. They study chemistry through explosive compound analysis. They practice teamwork through tactical exercises. But they also create art, pursue science, and explore philosophy. We simply do it all with the understanding that someday we might need to defend it." The difference was subtle but important. The humans hadn't become a purely military society. They'd become a society that integrated military preparedness into every aspect of civilization. "The point is," Chun continued, "we have the tools and training necessary to fight this war. What we need from you is cooperation, not resistance. Help us protect your people, maintain order in the rear areas, and don't interfere with operations you don't understand." Commander Valterra's patterns shifted to deep blue, a sign of serious consideration among her people. "What guarantees do we have that human forces will withdraw once the threat is eliminated?" "None," Chen answered bluntly. "You'll have to trust that a species that spent 1,000 years hiding in the dark to protect a galaxy that forgot they existed will continue to act in everyone's best interests." The honesty was startling. Most military leaders would have offered reassurances or diplomatic promises. Chen simply stated the facts and left the decision to others. "However," she added, "consider the alternative. If we fail to stop the Harbingers, the question of human military presence becomes academic." The aide approached and whispered something in Chen's ear. Her expression grew grim. "I'm afraid this meeting is over," she announced. "We're detecting massive void disturbances in the outer rim. The Harbingers are beginning their advance earlier than projected." Alarms began sounding throughout the station as automated systems detected the same anomalies. The representatives watched their displays in horror as entire sections of space began showing impossible readings. "All fleet commanders return to your vessels immediately," Chen ordered, her casual demeanor replaced by military efficiency. "Implement emergency protocols Alpha through Delta. Civilian populations in outer rim systems are to be evacuated within 72 hours. As the representatives hurried to comply, Fleet Admiral Kexmara paused at the exit. "Admiral Chun," she called out. "Good luck." Chen nodded grimly. "We're all going to need it." Outside the station's windows, stars were beginning to flicker as massive objects moved into position. The human fleet was deploying for war, and the galaxy would never be the same. The age of peace was over. The age of survival had begun. The first Harbinger fleet materialized at the edge of the Kepler Nebula 3 days ahead of schedule, catching even human intelligence off guard. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the tactical display from the bridge of a UES Retribution, humanity's newest dreadnought, as impossible geometries began tearing holes in space-time itself. "Contact Admiral Chun," she ordered her communications officer. "Tell her the outer perimeter has been breached. We're looking at, Christ, I can't even count them properly. The enemy vessels, if they could be called vessels, defied visual comprehension. They appeared as shadows cast by objects existing in dimensions beyond normal perception, their true forms hidden behind veils of twisted space. What the human sensors could detect suggested structures kilometers in length, moving with purpose through the quantum foam that surrounded their entry point. Lieutenant Commander Torres, the ship's tactical officer, struggled with readings that kept shifting. "Captain, our targeting computers can't lock onto them. Every time we get a fix, the targets seem to exist in multiple locations simultaneously." "Switch to manual targeting," Vasquez ordered. "Trust your instincts, not the machines. The Harbingers play games with reality. We fight them with human intuition." Around them, the combined human defense fleet began taking formation. 300 vessels, ranging from nimble destroyers to massive battleships, moved with precision that spoke of countless training exercises. Every captain knew their role. Every crew had drilled for this moment until the procedures were burned into their neural pathways. The Retribution's science officer, Dr. Sarah Kim, monitored readings from the ancient Vorthan sensors they'd integrated into their systems. "Captain, I'm detecting massive spatial distortions around the enemy formation. They're not just moving through space, they're rewriting local physics as they advance." Through the main view screen, they could see the effect. Space itself rippled around the Harbinger fleet like water disturbed by an impossibly large object. Stars in the background shifted position as gravitational constants fluctuated. Several small asteroids simply winked out of existence as reality became unstable around them. "All ships, this is Admiral Chun aboard the Dauntless," came a transmission from the fleet flagship. "Remember your training. The Harbingers will try to make you doubt your own senses. Trust your instruments, trust your crew, and trust in the fact that we've been preparing for this moment for 1,000 years." The human fleet had arranged itself in a formation that looked chaotic to outside observers, but made perfect sense to those who understood void combat. Rather than presenting a united front, the ships were scattered across a vast three-dimensional space, making it impossible for the Harbingers to target multiple vessels with area effect weapons. Captain Vasquez felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. She'd trained for this battle her entire life, as had her parents and their parents before them. Every human military officer could trace their lineage back to families who dedicated themselves to protecting the galaxy from threats others couldn't imagine. "Incoming transmission from the Harbinger fleet," announced Communications Officer Park, her voice tight with tension. "Put it through," Vasquez ordered, though she knew what they'd hear. The sound that filled the bridge wasn't quite language. It was meaning projected directly into conscious minds, bypassing the ears entirely. The message carried concepts that human psychology could barely process. Hunger that consumed reality itself, intelligence that existed across multiple dimensions, and an absolute certainty that all organized matter was an aberration to be corrected. "Cut transmission," Vasquez ordered after several crew members began showing signs of disorientation. "Standard protocol. No extended contact with Harbinger communications." Dr. Kim looked up from her console, her face pale. "Captain, they're demanding we withdraw. They claim this galaxy is contaminated by our presence. They want to restore it to its natural state." "Natural state meaning empty void," Torres muttered. "We've heard this speech before." The Harbingers had made similar demands during every previous encounter. They viewed organized matter, planets, stars, life itself, as a distortion of the universe's proper condition. In their cosmology, existence was an error that needed correction. "All ships, weapons free," came Admiral Chen's order across the fleet network. "Engage at maximum effective range. Do not allow them to close to melee distance." The human fleet opened fire simultaneously, 300 vessels unleashing everything they had. But these weren't conventional weapons. They were tools designed specifically for fighting enemies that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Quantum disruptors fired beams that could damage targets existing in parallel dimensions. Reality anchors created stable zones where Harbinger phase-shifting abilities wouldn't function. Temporal scramblers disrupted the enemy's ability to predict future events. Captain Vasquez watched as their weapons found their targets. Massive explosions of energy that seemed to fold space in on itself. Several Harbinger vessels, or at least the parts of them that existed in normal space, took visible damage. Direct hits on targets 7 through 12, Torres reported. But they're regenerating. The damaged sections are just rebuilding themselves. It was the Harbinger's most frustrating ability. They existed simultaneously across multiple dimensions, so damage inflicted in normal space was rapidly repaired by drawing matter from parallel realities. The only way to truly destroy them was to damage them across all dimensional layers simultaneously. Bring us about, bearing 27 Mark IV, Vasquez ordered. Target the lead vessel with full quantum barrage. All weapons, sustain fire. The Retribution's massive guns swiveled toward the largest Harbinger construct, a thing that appeared as a dark cathedral floating in space. The quantum disruptors fired in sequence, each beam calculated to strike a different dimensional layer of their target. For a moment, it seemed to work. The Harbinger vessel shuddered, its reality distorting field fluctuating. But then it began to change, its shape flowing like liquid metal as it adapted to their weapons. They're learning, Dr. Kim observed grimly. Each hit is less effective than the last. Across the battle zone, the same pattern was repeating. Human weapons would score initial successes, only to find their effectiveness diminishing as the Harbingers adapted. It was going to be a war of technological evolution, with each side constantly developing new tactics to counter the other's advances. Admiral's compliments, Park announced, were ordered to fall back to secondary positions. The Harbingers are beginning their counterattack. The enemy response came in the form of weapons that defied description. Beams of non-light that caused matter to forget how to exist. Projectiles that traveled backward through time to strike targets before they were fired. Energy fields that converted ordered matter back into primordial quantum foam. The human destroyer Vigilant, commanded by Captain Rodriguez, took a direct hit from one such weapon. For a terrifying moment, the ship began to fade from existence, its crew's screams cutting across the communication channels before ending abruptly. But the Vigilant didn't disappear. Emergency systems activated, reality anchors engaged, and the ship snapped back into full existence. The crew was shaken, but alive, protected by technology humanity had spent centuries perfecting. Damage report from the Vigilant, Park announced. Hull integrity at 60%, but all systems functional. Captain Rodriguez reports his crew is ready to continue the engagement. It was moments like these that demonstrated humanity's greatest strength. Not their weapons or technology, but their absolute refusal to surrender. The Harbingers could bend reality around them, but they couldn't break the human spirit. The battle continued for 6 brutal hours. Human ships darted in and out of engagement range, using superior maneuverability to avoid the worst of the Harbinger weapons. Ancient defensive platforms, awakened from millennia of slumber, added their firepower to the mix. But slowly, inevitably, the human forces began taking losses. The destroyer Defiant succumbed to a weapon that aged its hull to dust in seconds. The cruiser Valiant's crew was driven insane by exposure to pure void thoughts. The battleship Indomitable simply vanished when reality around it became too unstable to maintain coherent matter. Admiral Chun is ordering general withdrawal to the Aegis line, Park reported. We're to regroup at the ancient fortress stations. Captain Vasquez nodded grimly. The first engagement had gone about as expected. Humanity had hurt the enemy, but couldn't stop them completely. The Real defense would be mounted from the massive installations that had been built during the original Void Wars. As the human fleet withdrew, the Harbinger forces began advancing deeper into the galaxy. But they weren't pursuing at maximum speed. They were methodically erasing human defensive positions, ensuring nothing remained that could threaten their rear areas. The retreat was orderly but heartbreaking. Behind them, human outposts that had watched the galactic rim for centuries were being systematically annihilated. Millions of people who dedicated their lives to early warning were dying to buy time for the main population centers. "Captain," Dr. Kim called out, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "I'm detecting something unusual about the Harbinger advancement pattern." Vasquez moved to her station, studying the tactical display. The enemy forces were indeed moving in a specific pattern, avoiding certain systems while focusing intense effort on others. "They're not just conquering territory," Kim continued. "They're searching for something specific. Look at the systems they're prioritizing: ancient Vorthan research stations, crystalline Confederacy archaeological sites, places where the old civilizations conducted their most advanced experiments." The implications hit Vasquez like a physical blow. They're looking for the control nexus. The control nexus was legendary even among humans, a theoretical command center that the ancient civilizations had supposedly built to coordinate galaxy-wide defenses. If it existed, and if the Harbingers found it, they could potentially turn humanity's own defensive systems against them. "Give me a priority channel to Admiral Chun," Vasquez ordered. "She needs to know about this immediately." But even as she gave the order, she could see more Harbinger fleets materializing at the galaxy's edge. The first engagement had been just a probing attack. The real invasion was beginning. In her quarters that night, Captain Vasquez stood before the small memorial she kept for her great-grandmother, Elena Vasquez Sr., who'd commanded a destroyer during the early days of human preparation. The older woman's journals spoke of doubt, of wondering if their preparations would ever be necessary, of hoping their children might live in peace. Well, she whispered to the photograph, "it looks like all that preparation is finally paying off. I just hope it's enough." Outside her viewport, the stars were disappearing one by one as more Harbinger fleets arrived. The galaxy was about to become a battlefield on a scale that dwarfed even the ancient Void Wars. But humanity was ready. They'd been ready for 1,000 years. General Marcus Kane stood in the command center of Fortress Omega, humanity's greatest defensive installation, watching as the galaxy burned around them. The massive structure, built into an artificial planet at the confluence of 7 major hyperspace lanes, represented the culmination of 1,000 years of preparation. Its weapons could crack moons, its shields could deflect supernova, and its strategic position made it the linchpin of galactic defense. But even here, in humanity's strongest fortress, Kane could feel the weight of approaching doom. "Sir, we're receiving updates from the evacuation fleets," reported Colonel Maria Santos, his chief of staff. "Admiral Chen's forces have successfully extracted 93% of the civilian population from the Outer Rim worlds. Total refugee count is approaching 2 billion individuals." Kane nodded grimly. 2 billion people, representatives of dozens of species, now depended on humanity's ability to hold the line against an enemy that grew stronger with each passing day. The responsibility was crushing, but it was what humans had trained for. "What's our status on the defensive grid?" he asked. Major Thompson, the installation's technical officer, consulted his displays. "All primary systems are online. We've successfully integrated the ancient Vorthan defense protocols with our modern weapon systems. The quantum disruption field is at maximum strength, and the reality anchors are maintaining stable space-time within a 50-light-year radius." The defensive grid was humanity's masterpiece, a network of interconnected installations that could coordinate their firepower across galactic distances. When complete, it would create overlapping fields of destruction that even the Harbingers would find difficult to penetrate. But they were running out of time to finish it. "General," called out Lieutenant Commander Park from the communication station. "Priority message from Admiral Chun aboard the Dauntless. She's requesting immediate conference with all sector commanders." Kane moved to the central holographic display as the other commanders appeared. Admiral Chun aboard her flagship, General Rodriguez from Fortress Beta, Admiral Kim from the mobile defense platform Prometheus, and a dozen other leaders scattered across the galaxy's defensive positions. "The situation has deteriorated faster than our worst-case projections," Admiral Chun began without preamble. Her image flickered slightly as Harbinger interference disrupted long-range communications. "The enemy has broken through our outer perimeter at 17 different points. They're advancing on multiple axes toward the core worlds. The tactical display updated to show Harbinger forces spreading like a cancer through the galaxy's outer regions. Entire systems had gone dark, their populations either evacuated or lost to weapons that unmade matter itself. More troubling, Chun continued. We've confirmed that they're actively seeking something. Our intelligence suggests they're looking for the Control Nexus, the legendary command center that supposedly coordinates all ancient defensive systems. General Rodriguez, his scarred face grim with determination, spoke up. If such a thing exists, do we have any idea where to find it? Kane had been dreading this moment. As the senior human military officer, he was one of only a dozen people who knew the truth about the Control Nexus. It wasn't legendary, it was real, and it was hidden here on Fortress Omega. The Nexus exists, he announced, causing several commanders to gasp. It's been integrated into this facility for the past 5 centuries. We've been using its computational power to coordinate our defensive preparations. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled commanders. The Control Nexus was the galaxy's ultimate strategic asset, a quantum supercomputer built by the combined efforts of every major civilization during the original Void Wars. Its loss would cripple their ability to coordinate galactic defenses. That explains why they're pushing so hard toward the core systems, Admiral Kim observed. If they capture the Nexus, they can turn our own defenses against us. Kane nodded, which is why we can't let them take this position. Fortress Omega must hold, regardless of cost. The weight of that statement settled over the assembled commanders. They were talking about potentially sacrificing billions of lives to protect a single installation. It was the kind of cold calculation that humanity had learned to make during their centuries of preparation. What are our defensive capabilities? Asked General Martinez from Fortress Gamma. Major Thompson activated the fortress schematics. We have 360 primary weapon emplacements, including 12 Vorthan supercannons capable of cracking planet-sized targets. Our shield array can deflect direct stellar bombardment for approximately 72 hours. The Reality Anchor Network creates a stable zone where Harbinger dimensional manipulation is severely limited. The numbers were impressive, but everyone knew they wouldn't be enough if the Harbingers concentrated their full strength on this position. We're not fighting this battle alone, Kane announced. I've authorized the activation of Protocol Omega. We're bringing every remaining ancient weapon system online simultaneously. The implications hit the commanders immediately. Protocol Omega meant awakening weapons that had been deemed too dangerous to use except in the most extreme circumstances. Planet killers, star breakers, devices that could tear holes in space-time itself. Sir, Colonel Santos said quietly, Protocol Omega includes the reality bombs. Using those weapons could damage the fundamental structure of local space. Kane's expression was stone cold. If we lose the Nexus, local space becomes irrelevant. The Harbingers will have one. The conference continued for another hour, with commanders updating their strategic positions and coordinating mutual support. But underlying every discussion was the growing certainty that they were fighting a losing battle. The Harbingers were simply too strong, too numerous, and too alien for conventional tactics to defeat. As the conference ended, Kane remained alone in the command center, staring at the tactical display. Harbinger forces were closing on his position from 3 directions, and his scouts reported that reality itself was beginning to break down in their wake. General, Major Thompson approached cautiously. We're receiving a transmission from the Harbinger fleet. They're offering terms. Kane almost laughed. Let me guess. Unconditional surrender in exchange for a quick death. Actually, sir, it's more complex than that. They claim they don't want to destroy us. They want us to join them. The transmission played on the main screen, its alien harmonics barely translated into comprehensible concepts. The Harbingers spoke of evolution beyond physical form, of existence unbound by the limitations of matter and energy. They offered humanity a place in their collective consciousness, freed from the burden of individual mortality. They see us as kindred spirits, Thompson explained, his voice filled with revulsion. They think our preparations for war demonstrate that we understand the futility of material existence. Kane studied the message, noting the subtle psychological manipulation woven throughout. The Harbingers were master strategists. They knew that breaking human would be more effective than simply overwhelming their defenses. Broadcast my response on all frequencies, Kane ordered. The human race chooses to remain human. We fight. The reply was simple, direct, and absolutely final. There would be no negotiation, no surrender, no compromise. Humanity would face extinction before accepting the Harbinger's offer of transcendence. The response seemed to trigger something in the approaching enemy fleets. Space around Fortress Omega began rippling as massive objects translated from hyperspace. The Harbinger assault force was larger than anything they'd previously encountered. Hundreds of vessels that existed only partially in normal space. Their true forms hidden in dimensions that human senses couldn't perceive. All stations, battle alert, Kane announced. This is what we've trained for. Every sacrifice, every preparation, every choice we've made for the past 1,000 years has led to this moment. Make them count. The fortress's weapons powered up with a sound like thunder rolling through the structure's bones. Ancient systems merged seamlessly with human technology, creating destructive capabilities that exceeded even the builder's original designs. The first Harbinger attack came without warning. Reality simply ceased to exist in a sphere around the fortress, replaced by howling void that tried to pull all matter into nothingness. But the reality anchors held, creating a bubble of stable space-time that protected the installation. Kane felt the fortress shudder as its shields absorbed energies that could boil oceans. The main display showed weapon impacts that registered as impossible readings, negative matter, inverted time, forces that existed at right angles to conventional physics. Return fire, he ordered. All weapons, full power. Fortress Omega's response was devastating. The Vorthan supercannons fired beams that punched through dimensional barriers to strike targets across multiple realities simultaneously. Quantum disruptors created expanding spheres of chaos that damaged Harbinger vessels faster than they could regenerate. But for every enemy ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The Harbingers were throwing everything they had at this single target, recognizing its critical importance to humanity's defensive strategy. Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups in the enemy formation, reported Thompson. They're preparing to use some kind of superweapon. On the screen, space around the largest Harbinger vessel began to fold in on itself, creating a gravitational anomaly that pulled light itself into spiraling patterns. Whatever they were building, it was beyond anything in human experience. Activate the reality bombs, Kane ordered quietly. Colonel Santos looked stricken. Sir, we don't know what effect those will have on local space-time. We could damage the galaxy itself. Kane met her gaze steadily. If we don't use them, there won't be a galaxy left to damage. The reality bombs were humanity's ultimate weapon, devices that could damage the fundamental forces that held space-time together. They'd been built in absolute secrecy, tested only in computer simulations, and stored with the prayer that they'd never need to be used. Weapons armed, Thompson reported, his voice tight with strain, targeting the primary Harbinger formation. Kane took a deep breath, knowing that his next words might doom the galaxy to save it. Fire. The reality bombs detonated in a cascade of impossible energies. Space itself screamed as the fundamental constants that governed physics fluctuated wildly. For a terrifying moment, it seemed as if the entire local region might collapse into primordial chaos. But when the energies dissipated, the Harbinger's superweapon was gone. Not destroyed, simply erased from existence, along with the vessels that had been building it. The enemy formation wavered, their confidence shaken by the demonstration of humanity's ultimate resolve. Damage report, Kane called out. The reality bombs worked, Thompson announced with amazement. Local space-time is stable, though we're reading some minor gravitational anomalies. The Harbinger force has taken massive casualties. Kane allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'd proven that humanity wouldn't hesitate to use any weapon necessary to defend their galaxy. But he knew this was only the beginning. More Harbinger fleets were approaching. The galaxy's other defensive positions were under assault, and somewhere in the void between galaxies, even greater threats were stirring. The war for reality itself was just beginning. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the observation deck of a UES Eternal Vigilance, humanity's newest and most powerful dreadnought, watching as the final battle for the galaxy unfolded around her. 3 years had passed since the first Harbinger incursion, 3 years of retreat and sacrifice and losses that numbered in the trillions. But now at last they had reached the endgame. "Ma'am," called Captain Rodriguez from the bridge below, "we're receiving reports from all battle groups. The Harbingers are committing everything they have to this final assault." Chen nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the scope of the battle. Across a front spanning half the galaxy, human forces and their allies were locked in desperate combat with an enemy that had grown beyond all previous projections. The Harbingers had adapted, evolved, and learned from every defeat, becoming something far more dangerous than the entities that had threatened the galaxy eons ago. "Status of the core worlds?" she asked. "Evacuation is 97% complete," reported Commander Park. "The remaining populations are either military personnel or volunteers who've chosen to remain." The core worlds, the ancient heart of galactic civilization, had been transformed into the ultimate fortress. Every planet bristled with weapons that could crack moons. Every space station was a weapons platform, and the very fabric of space-time had been reinforced with reality anchors that prevented Harbinger dimensional manipulation. But it wasn't enough. It had never been enough. "Admiral," came the voice of General Kane from Fortress Omega, his image appearing on the main screen, "we've confirmed the worst-case scenario. The Harbingers have found a way to destabilize our reality anchors. They're not just invading our dimension anymore. They're converting it into an extension of the void." Chun felt her stomach drop. The reality anchors were humanity's greatest defensive asset, the technology that allowed them to fight enemies who existed partially outside normal space-time. If the Harbingers could nullify them, the war was effectively over. "How long do we have?" she asked. 12 hours before the cascade effect reaches critical mass," Kane replied grimly. "After that, this entire region of space will become indistinguishable from the void. All organized matter will simply cease to exist." The implications hit every officer on the bridge. They weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting to prevent the complete erasure of physical reality in this part of the universe. "All commands, this is Admiral Chun," she announced on the fleet-wide channel. "We are implementing the final protocol. All personnel acknowledge." The responses came back immediately. Dozens of ship captains and station commanders confirming that they understood what the final protocol meant. It was humanity's last desperate gambit, a plan so extreme that it had been classified beyond all normal security levels. Chun moved to the central command console and placed her hand on the biometric scanner. Around her, other senior officers did the same, their combined authorization codes unlocking systems that had remained sealed for over a century. "Admiral," whispered Colonel Santos, who had transferred to the Eternal Vigilance when Fortress Omega was evacuated, "are you certain about this?" "The projections show a 93% chance of total galactic sterilization, and a 7% chance that something will survive," Chen replied. "Given the alternative, I'll take those odds." The final protocol was exactly what its name implied, the ultimate weapon that humanity had developed in absolute secrecy, using technology that pushed the boundaries of what was possible even with ancient Vorthan science. It was a weapon that would either save the galaxy or destroy it completely. "Beginning sequence initiation," announced the ship's AI. "All personnel, prepare for reality distortion effects." Across human space, hidden installations began powering up. Deep within the galactic core, where space-time was already twisted by the massive black hole at the galaxy's heart, ancient machines stirred a life. They had been placed there centuries ago, waiting for this moment when desperation finally overcame moral restraint. The weapon was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Rather than fighting the Harbingers directly, it would use the galaxy's own structure against them. The central black hole would be artificially destabilized, creating a cascade effect that would reset the physical constants throughout the entire galactic region. Everything would die. Every human, every alien, every microorganism that had ever lived. But when the process was complete, the fundamental forces that allowed organized matter to exist would be restored. In time, perhaps millions of years, life could evolve again. "Admiral," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving transmissions from our allies. The Zephyrian Council is demanding an explanation. They're detecting massive energy buildups throughout human space." Chen looked at the faces of the beings who had dismissed humanity as myth, who who had lived in peace while humans prepared for this moment. Now, in the final hour, they were beginning to understand what their protectors had been willing to sacrifice. "Put them through," she ordered. Counselor Vextara's image appeared on screen, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with panic. "Admiral Chun, what are you doing? Our sensors are detecting gravitational anomalies that suggest you're attempting to destabilize stellar masses throughout the core region." "We're saving the galaxy," Chun replied simply. "The Harbingers have found a way to convert our reality into void space. In approximately 11 hours, everything you've ever known will simply cease to exist. We're preventing that by destroying everything ourselves." Vextara's patterns flashed in horror. "Surely there must be another way." Chen's smile held no warmth. "If there was another way, don't you think we would have found it? We've had 1,000 years to consider alternatives. This is the only option that preserves the possibility of future life in this galaxy." The connection ended as the Zephyrian fled to her own people, no doubt to spend their final hours in prayer or philosophy. Chun envied them the luxury of hope. "Ma'am," Captain Rodriguez called from the bridge, "the Harbingers are responding to our energy signatures. They're concentrating their forces to stop us." The tactical display showed the terrifying truth. Every Harbinger vessel in the galaxy was converging on human positions, their alien intelligence recognizing the threat that humanity's final weapon represented. They came in numbers that defied calculation, millions of vessels that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. "All fleets, prepare for final engagement," Chun ordered. "Our job is to hold them off for 11 more hours. Whatever it takes." The battle that followed dwarfed every previous engagement in the war's history. Human ships threw themselves at Harbinger formations with suicidal fury, trading their lives for precious minutes of delay. Ancient weapon systems, pushed beyond their design limits, burned out in brilliant displays of destruction. The Eternal Vigilance shuddered under impacts that would have vaporized lesser vessels. Around them, human dreadnoughts died one by one, their crews fighting to the last breath to buy time for the final protocol to complete. "Direct hit on the Defiance," reported the tactical officer. "She's gone, ma'am. The Indomitable is heavily damaged and requesting permission to ram the nearest Harbinger capital ship." "Permission granted," Chin replied without hesitation. "Tell Captain Morrison that humanity won't forget his sacrifice." Through the viewports, they could see the Indomitable's final charge. The massive battleship, its hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere, accelerated directly toward a Harbinger vessel the size of a small moon. The collision created an explosion visible from star systems away, taking out both vessels in a blast of converted matter. But it was a trade humanity couldn't afford. For every Harbinger ship destroyed, they lost 3 vessels of their own. The math was inexorable. Long before the final protocol completed, the human fleet would be annihilated. "Ma'am," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from—" "I'm not sure who." "The signal is coming from everywhere at once." The voice that emerged from the speakers was humanity's own, but changed beyond recognition. It was Admiral Thompson, who had commanded the fortress at the Galactic Rim before his position was overrun 3 months ago. "Sarah," the voice said, carrying harmonics that human throats couldn't produce, "you need to stop. We understand now. The Harbingers aren't our enemies. They're our future. They've shown us evolution beyond the limits of physical form." Chun felt ice form in her stomach. Thompson had been converted, his consciousness absorbed into the Harbinger collective while maintaining his individual identity. It was their newest tactic, using familiar voices to break human morale. "Thompson," she replied, "if you're still in there, you know what we have to do." "I am still here," the voice replied, "but I'm also so much more. Sarah, the final protocol will destroy everything we've built, everything we've learned. There's another way. Join with us. Become part of something greater than individual existence." Around the bridge, several officers wavered. The offer was seductive: eternal existence, freedom from fear and pain and death. After 3 years of impossible war, the promise of peace was overwhelming. "Admiral," whispered Colonel Santos, "what if they're right? What if we're about to commit the greatest act of genocide in galactic history for no reason?" Chen looked at her oldest friend, seeing the doubt that was spreading through her crew like a virus. The Harbingers were master manipulators, using humanity's own exhaustion and despair against them. "Colonel," she said quietly, "do you remember the oath we swore when we first put on these uniforms?" Santos straightened, her military training overriding the alien influence. To protect and defend all life in this galaxy, regardless of cost. "Then, you know what we have to do." Chun turned to address her entire crew, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never wavered in her convictions. "Listen to me, all of you. The Harbingers offer us transcendence, evolution, freedom from the burden of physical existence. But what they're really offering is extinction, not the clean death of the final protocol, but the slow dissolution of everything that makes us human." She gestured to the tactical display, where the battle raged across dozens of star systems. "Look around you. Look at what we've built, what we've protected, what we've been willing to die for. We are the guardians of chaos, the defenders of imperfection, the champions of life that refuses to accept its own limitations." The bridge crew was listening now, their doubt replaced by something harder and more determined. The Harbingers see existence as an error to be corrected. We see it as a miracle to be preserved. If we must choose between perfect void and imperfect life, we choose life. "Every time." "Ma'am," reported the tactical officer, "the final protocol is at 90% completion. 6 more minutes." On the screen, Thompson's face appeared, still recognizably human, but with eyes that held depths no mortal consciousness could achieve. "Sarah, please. We can feel the weapon building. You're about to murder trillions of beings who could live forever in the collective. How is that protecting life?" Chen met his gaze steadily. "Because sometimes, Admiral, protecting life means preserving the possibility of its return. The collective you've joined is static, unchanging, perfect. Life is messy, chaotic, and constantly growing. I'll take growth over perfection any day." "Then you've doomed us all," Thompson replied sadly before the transmission cut out. Final protocol at 95% came the announcement. "All personnel prepare for reality distortion." Around them, space itself began to shimmer as the weapon reached critical mass. The laws of physics wavered, gravity fluctuated, and time itself seemed to skip like a broken recording. The Harbinger fleet, sensing their impending defeat, made one last desperate assault. Hundreds of their largest vessels converged on human positions, their weapons tearing holes in space-time itself. But they were too late. 100%, announced the AI. "Final protocol is active." The weapon fired, though fired was inadequate to describe what actually happened. Every black hole in the galaxy simultaneously destabilized, creating a cascade effect that reset the fundamental constants of physics throughout the entire region. Chun felt her consciousness expanding as the weapon's energy washed over them. For one impossible moment, she could perceive the entire galaxy. Every star, every planet, every living being, as it died, and was reborn in the space of an instant. The Harbingers screamed as their non-physical forms were forced back into normal space-time, where they were subject to the same limitations as every other form of life. Their vast fleets simply ceased to exist as the physics that allowed their transdimensional nature was temporarily rewritten. But humanity died too. Every human ship, every human world, every human life was snuffed out as the wave of restructured reality swept across the galaxy. Chen's last sight was of her crew, their faces peaceful as they accepted their sacrifice. The galaxy went dark, but not forever. When the cascade effect finally stabilized, the fundamental forces that allowed matter to organize into complex patterns were restored. The void was banished back to the spaces between galaxies, and the possibility of life, new life, different life, but life nonetheless, was preserved. Somewhere in the ruins of human space, a small probe activated. It had been designed to survive reality restructuring, protected by technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was theoretically possible. Its message was simple, broadcast on frequencies that would eventually be discovered by whatever intelligence arose to inherit this galaxy. We were humanity. We were the guardians you never knew you had. We chose to die so that life could continue. Remember us and do better. The galaxy was empty now, but it would not remain so forever. And when new civilizations arose to explore the stars, They would find among the ruins evidence of a species that had faced extinction rather than accept the sterile perfection of the void. Humanity's war was over. Their victory was absolute, and their legacy would endure until the last star burned out.